Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome American Gaming Association President and CEO, Geoff Freeman.
Wow. Your staff is great sometimes not so much. Good morning and welcome to G2E 2015. I'm thrilled that all of you are here, grateful for your attendance and for your support of this great show. I want to especially thank Las Vegas Sands, the Sands Expo and Convention Center, and our partners at Reed Exhibitions for helping us make this event a success. We hear you, we talk to you yearly about your interests, your concerns, what you want to see from this event. We're committed to evolving the show. We're committed to making it better year after year. We hope you will continue to provide that feedback. We think we've provided a great show this year, and we'll provide an even better one next year with your continued feedback. It's been a great year since we last met. A lot has changed in the gaming industry, but it's been a good year for the AGA. It's been a good year for the gaming industry across the country. When you look at the AGA, we've grown by about 50%. We've brought on tribal organizations into the AGA. We've diversified, but yet we've become more united than the industry has ever been. We're focusing on issues of importance, and I think we're making great strides in addressing the most fundamental issues facing gaming today. From an industry perspective, we're also having a good, successful year across the country. Moody's recently raised its outlook for the gaming industry. When you look at various markets, you see a rebound. Here in Las Vegas, our first billion-dollar month in May since 2013. Across the country, Maryland, nearly $500 million in fiscal 2014. Plain Ridge Park opened to success in Massachusetts. Even Atlantic City, a market that is right-sizing, has 7 of 8 properties now making a profit. The gaming industry is a $240 billion industry today that supports 1.7 million jobs. It is a mainstream industry that is succeeding by nearly every measure. And that shouldn't surprise us when we think of the fact that nearly 90% of Americans now support gaming as an acceptable activity for themselves or for others. Gaming has been embraced. That's the good news. The bad news is that there seems to be this continued struggle, this continued problem between the attitudes that the American public has and the attitudes of some policymakers towards the gaming industry. Some policymakers continue to think of the gaming industry in antiquated notions, and that is an issue that I believe we have to address. But the question is, why do they continue to think of the industry in this way? I think it comes down to a tale of 2 industries. One industry that is heavily regulated, heavily taxed, focused on integrity, focused on communities, focused on our customers. That's the industry that everyone in this room represents. But there's another industry that operates in the shadows, an industry that funds criminal activity, an industry that is not concerned about integrity, an industry that is 2 to 3 times larger than the legal and regulated gaming industry today, and that is the industry of illegal gambling across the United States. It comes in many forms. In the state of Texas, and you see the quote on the screen, nearly 150,000 black market machines dot the market. When you look at illegal sports betting in this country, we know that $100 million was bet right here in Las Vegas around the Super Bowl in January and February. Yet 38 times more spending, $3.8 billion, was spent illegally across the United States. We have a $10 billion internet sweepstakes cafe market running rampant in every state in this country. The illegal gambling market continues to confuse policymakers, media, and others about who our industry is, what our industry is, and our commitment to our customers and our communities. I believe this is an issue we absolutely have to address. And there's no better example. I appreciate that. There's no better example of why we need to address that than what's happening in Massachusetts right now. A market where the public has voted by overwhelming numbers to support casinos. A market where companies want to spend in excess of $2 billion additional dollars to turn around communities. And yet we have a mayor in Boston, we have an attorney general that is putting up every roadblock they can possibly find to slow down casino development. Even the FBI has gotten involved, saying with casinos coming into the market, corruption can't be far behind. This is a market that everyone knows has illegal gambling at every turn. This is a market where one of these gray market daily fantasy sites is 2 blocks from the Attorney General's office. We absolutely have to address this issue for 3 reasons. 1, illegal gambling affects the credibility of our industry. And that credibility is directly tied to the public policy that we confront. The second reason we have to address this is every one of those people playing those 150,000 machines in the state of Texas are potential customers for Louisiana. And that's true across the country. And thirdly, the opportunity to address this issue is to build a partnership with law enforcement. Rather than be at opposite ends of the barrel, we can be working together to address an issue. And if we're working together, it will pay dividends for years to come. So what is the AGA doing, and how can you help in addressing this issue? There are 4 areas where we're focused. The first area we're focused is on running a campaign to stop illegal gambling in this country. We launched an initiative earlier this year called Stop Illegal Gambling, Play It Safe. We're partnered with law enforcement experts from the FBI, from the Department of Homeland Security, attorneys general, sheriffs, all around the country now working with us. We've built a star-studded advisory board to focus on this issue. The Attorney General of Mississippi has praised our efforts and worked with the National Association of Attorneys General to create their own committee on illegal gambling. We are now working hand in hand with law enforcement. It can only further their understanding of who we are, the credible way in which we behave, and our commitment to doing the right thing. We're also demonstrating our commitment to a culture of compliance. And you see that with everything we're doing on the issues of anti-money laundering and our work with FinCEN, the agency within the Department of Treasury focused on these issues. Earlier this year, we issued best practices on how everyone in the casino industry can better comply with anti-money laundering best practices. The second thing we've done is among others, we've worked here in Las Vegas. We hosted a conference earlier this year devoted to AML best practices, devoted to helping everybody in this industry improve their efforts to work with FinCEN and make sure that our industry, unlike that illegal industry, is always doing the right thing in this space. Our efforts have been so well received that FinCEN came to us and asked us to hand an award this year to the Boston Police Department on behalf of FinCEN for their efforts in cracking down on illegal activity based on information provided by the casino industry. Our Get to Know Gaming campaign that we launched more than a year ago is going around the country to tell the story of what this industry is. And I think this industry has one hell of a story to tell about the jobs that we provide, the community groups that we support, the difference we make when we go into communities across this country. Our Get to Know Gaming efforts are helping those in law enforcement, those in policymaking circles, better understand what this industry is all about. And our latest effort is our Gaming Votes initiative, where we're in Nevada, Pennsylvania, Ohio, battleground states across this country where presidential candidates are going. And we are demanding that they learn more about who this industry is. We all remember the words from President Obama in February of 2009, where he discouraged people from coming right here to Las Vegas for meetings and conventions, based on a misunderstanding of who this industry is and what we're all about. We are going to make sure that that doesn't happen again. But we can't do that on our own. We need your help. We need to grow as an industry. We need to engage everyone across this industry to become grassroots advocates, to share the stories of what makes this industry special, to be in the media, to writing letters to the editor, to talking to your friends and family about who this industry is. We need to become proselytizers about gaming. We need to be champions of gaming, and we're asking you to do just that. We're also asking you to join our grassroots army. I encourage you to go to gettoknowgaming.org, sign up to be a part of everything we're doing. Work with the AGA, work with the totality of this industry to tell our story. As I said, I think we've got a great story to tell. It's an honor to lead the AGA, to work with each and every one of you to champion this industry. I'm confident that our best days are ahead. We're excited to work with you. We thank you for your support. It's also my pleasure today to introduce our keynote speaker. Geoff, many of you may remember, from the MIT famous Blackjack team, the inspiration for the movie 21, and so much coverage of data and analytics and how it was used to bring down the house. Well, Geoff is now using that same skill set, that same expertise in data and analytics, and I think our industry can learn a lot from it. So please join me in welcoming Geoff Ma.
So thanks for having me here. One of the questions I always get asked is, so are you allowed back in Vegas? And apparently there's no one that waits for me at the jetway of McCarran Airport and says, excuse me, Mr. Ma, you have to turn around and go home. I'm allowed here. I'm just not allowed to play blackjack pretty much anywhere in Vegas. So how many of you guys have seen 21 or read the book Bringing Down the House? Okay, I know it's 9 a.m., I know you're in Vegas, but I need a little bit more enthusiasm. So the movie 21, it all started in 2001. A friend of mine by the name of Ben Mesrick was a writer. He had written about 6 novels at that time, but it's fair to say that his career was pretty much in the shitter. He had business school applications out and was contemplating no longer being a writer, and I walked up to him and I said, Ben, I have a great idea for your next book. And he said, what is it? And I said, well, me and my buddies from MIT, we go to Vegas, and we use math to beat the casinos. And this sort of like glossy look went over his face, and he said, you know what, I don't think anyone wants to read a book about a bunch of MIT nerds. And then about a month later, I took him with me to Vegas, and I showed him what we did. And he said, oh my God, this is the coolest thing. We should write a book about this. And I said, great idea, Ben. So he took this proposal to his publisher. His publisher looked at it and he said, you know what, good story, but I don't think anyone wants to read a book about a bunch of MIT nerds. Well, we didn't listen to her, and we wrote a book called Bringing Down the House, and it was a New York Times bestseller for over a year. And then a guy by the name of Kevin Spacey read the book and liked it so much that he turned it into a movie called 21. 21 was #1 in the box office 2 weeks in a row, and made $150 million off a $35 million budget. And one of the real bits of Hollywood magic, and I mean real Hollywood magic, is how you turn an average-looking Asian American male into a dashing British white guy, which is what they did in the movie. I was the inspiration for the main character. The movie went on, as I said, did really well. Ben Mesrick, the writer, went on to write a book called The Accidental Billionaires, which got turned into a movie called The Social Network, which won an Oscar. And I can say I made Ben Mesrick who he is today. So, okay. I always like to tell a few stories that weren't in the book, weren't in the movie. So those of you guys in the gaming industry, you think about your emerging markets, new places that are opening and legalizing gambling, etc., new types of games. For card counters like ourselves, our emerging markets were the opening of any casino, because we would always go there and we would see and be seen and try these new games out, try the new blackjack out at that table, and typically we would just go to new casinos. And so there's always 3 types of people that you see at the opening of any casino, and I expect this crowd to be able to get this answer. There's card counters, there's celebrities, and what's the 3rd type of person you always see at the opening of every casino? Well, I'm going to leave this joke till the end, because this industry obviously does not want to talk about this. So I was at the real estate conference. I'm sorry, I was at the opening of the Bellagio, and this is maybe I don't know, like 15 years ago. And there I am, opening of the Bellagio, playing blackjack with Kevin Costner, and Kevin Costner has his crew of friends around him. And Kevin is a good blackjack player, meaning he does the right thing most of the time. And then all of a sudden he starts to lose. And every hand he loses, his friends look at me and say, God, this is like Waterworld all over again. My second favorite story comes from the first NBA lockout. So in the late 90s, the NBA had a lockout. Where do you think NBA players go when they can't play basketball, well, they often go to casinos. I had the pleasure of playing blackjack with a bunch of the Knicks at Foxwoods Casino in Connecticut. And I sat down and I played with John Starks and Patrick Ewing. And if you guys all remember John Starks, he was this sort of gritty guy from the streets, fought for everything. The first thing he does is sit down and order a bottle of Merlot. And I went and saw John Starks go through this transformation that I'm sure many of you guys have seen, your friends go through. Maybe you haven't gone through yourself, where you start as sort of this sober, intelligent human being, and then after a little while, you become a little bit dicey in your sort of judgment. And John went through this sort of transformation. He puts his last $500 on the betting circle, and the dealer gives him an 11, and the dealer has a 6 up. So an 11 against a 6, what do? If you're playing blackjack? You double down. So unfortunately, John doesn't have any more money left. I flip him back a $500 chip, and I say, John, pay me back when you win. The dealer gives him a 5 to make 16, and John goes, man, you just jinxed me. And I said, it's okay, because I'm counting cards, so I know that there's probably a good chance that the dealer's going to bust. And I say to John, I think you're still going to win. The dealer flips a 10 to make 16, gets another 10 to make 26. John pays me back my $500 without a word of thank you. And it was at that moment that I decided I would never have John Starks on my fantasy basketball team. I really showed him. So those of you guys that have seen 21, you know that I'm in the movie, correct? I'm in the movie. This is so sad. Saddest moment of my life. Everyone's like, I don't know. So I play a dealer named Jeffrey. The guy that plays me, Jim Sturgis, walks up to me and says, Jeffrey, my brother from another mother. We have a witty back and forth. I have like 3 lines. I got a SAG card. This still is not ringing any bells to you people, is it? Well, if you want to go back and watch it, it's at about 59 minutes and 3 seconds. So this wonderful scene that none of you seem to remember took 3 days to film. And the second day I was out there, the cast, Kevin Spacey, Lawrence Fishburne, Case Bosworth, they say to me, hey, Geoff, we'd like to take you out to dinner tonight, and thank you for letting us tell your story on the big screen. And I said, okay, that'll be cool. So after we're done shooting, we go over to the Palms Casino. We're headed over to sit down and play, and to sit down and eat dinner. And as we're going over there, Kate Bosworth pulls me aside, and she says, and keep in mind, I'm 30 and single at this time, and she says, hey, Geoff, I've got a really fun idea for what you and I can do after dinner. And I said, okay, tell me more, Kate. And she said, I think it'd be really fun if we go and we play blackjack, and you can coach us, and we can win a lot of money. And I said, Kate, first off, that's not what I was hoping for. Second of all, I think that's a terrible idea. And she said, why? And I said, well, we're going to the Palms. They know me really well. They're not going to want me to play blackjack there. And she said, it's okay. You'll be with me. I'm a big star. They won't bother you. And I said, Kate, it's been a long time since Blue Crush. I don't know how big star you are anymore. But what seemed like this terrible idea, after 7 or 8 bottles of wine, seemed like this amazing idea. And we go up to the Palms Casino, sit down at the table. The floor person knows me, walks up to me and says, Geoff, what are you doing? And I said, I'm here to play blackjack with Kate Bosworth, Blue Crush, big star, no big deal, right? He calls upstairs, and he says, not only are you not allowed to play blackjack, but if your little friend Kate's at the table, you're not allowed to be within 20 feet of the table. What was cool is that gave me a lot of street cred with Kate, because she thought I was dangerous at that point. She's like, he's really dangerous. It didn't get me anywhere with her, but at least she thought I was dangerous. Okay, so let's talk about some important things. And one of the things that I like to think a lot about, gambling always gets this sort of like horrible, you see it in movies. You never see someone who gambles and has it all under control and is constructive and recreational. There's a lot of lessons that you can learn from gambling. And that's a lot of what I'm going to talk to you about today. So my story, the thing that sort of defines me as a person, was when I was 21 years old. I had just learned this system to use math to beat the casinos. Okay, and you can sort of go in and you can sort of use your intelligence and whatnot, but every decision you make at that blackjack table is 100% objective. It's not subjective. It's all governed by math. So here I am. I bet 3 hands of $10,000, and the dealer gives me a pair of 9s, an 11, and the dealer has a 5 up. So pair of 9s against a 5, what do? I got to split. So I split I get to play each 9 separately. On the first 9, I get a 2 to make 11. What do? Double down. So I double down on that. I get an 8 to make 19. On the 9, I hit. And then on the last 11, what do? I got to double down again, which means I put another $10,000 down, and I get an 8 to make 19. So I have 19, 19, 19 against the dealer's 5. How much money do I have on the table? Pretty good, $50,000. Like, usually people have trouble counting this. I was at the National Accountants Conference, told this story, said how much money I have on the table. You, of all people, should be able to get this. They're all like, 30, 40,000? I was like, yeah, and you do my taxes. That explains why our country's in a deficit. Okay, so here I am. I have 19, 19, 19 against the dealer's 5. The dealer flips a 6 to make 11, and then gets a king to make 21. I lose $50,000. This woman behind me shrieks, "Oh my God, that's my entire mortgage!" And I want to turn around and go, "Where the hell do you live?" Because in San Francisco, where I live, that's a cardboard box in the Tenderloin. But again, every decision we make at this table is 100% objective, and you don't make emotional decisions. You don't chase, you don't go crazy. And now the math calls for me to bet 3 hands of $10,000, but imagine the feeling I have right now after losing $50,000 and math telling me now to bet another 3 hands of $10,000. So this is one of those moments where you reflect. I graduated from MIT in 1994 with a mechanical engineering degree that I've never used in my life. It makes my parents very happy. Then this whole internet thing happened. I moved back to Boston. I helped start a bunch of internet companies, the last 4 of which I have sold to different companies. And I love this sort of concept. The Al Gore inventing the internet joke is one of the most old, tired jokes in the world, but we can say Al invented 2 things, one good, one bad. He invented the internet, which is good for us, and then invented global warming, which has been bad for us. It's a funny joke, guys. Come on. You can always tell a lot about the political crowd of the political environment of the crowd by whether they laugh at that joke. I spoke at the National Pest Association, Exterminators Association. I got a standing O when I told that joke. So anyway, so then this whole idea of data came out in the world of sports, the whole concept of Moneyball. And I realized, like, maybe I could go work one day in sports. I started a company called Citizen Sports and Pro Trade that we sold to Yahoo. And most recently, this company, 10Xer, that I started was all around trying to use data and analytics to predict human behavior, to actually look at your own employees and see who was good and who was bad and who was struggling. And so I did that for a while, and then that company we sold to Twitter, and now I work for Twitter. But during this whole time, I was a professional card counter. Okay? I was a professional blackjack player from 1994 to 2001. So what does that mean? So quickly, I'm going to take you through some of the lessons that you can learn from card counting. The first is to favor data over gut. Okay, so basic strategy, which we describe, which is what you do at any hand of the blackjack table. There's this matrix that shows you what your card is and what the dealer's up card is. And based on this matrix, you know what to do at the table. It's been simulated out 1,000,000 times. There is only one right decision. If you have a pair of 9s and the dealer has a 7, there is only one right decision. And the average blackjack player loses about 3% of the money they put on the table. Okay? If you play basic strategy perfectly, you're only going to lose about 0.5% of the dollars you put on the table. But a lot of people don't play basic strategy. And it's very odd, but it actually is very interesting because it highlights some emotional biases that we all have. And the first one is this idea of omission bias. Okay, so imagine that you have 15 and the dealer has a 9 up. What should you do in that situation? You should hit. You should take a card. But if you get a 7, an 8, a 9, a 10, a jack, a queen, a king, you're going to lose right away. So a lot of people in that situation, even though if they know it's the right thing to do, they'll favor inactivity over activity. They'll hope that they can stand, and maybe the dealer will have to take a card, and maybe the dealer will bust. But that's the wrong decision. And for a long time, in my life, I looked at this as like I didn't understand why people did it. And I kind of like had this idea of omission bias and how important it was to not favor inactivity or activity. And when I wrote a book called The House Advantage, Playing the Odds to Win Big in Business, and it's all about, I can stop for a second. It's available on Amazon if anyone wants to order it. But this book that I wrote, the reason I wrote it is I wanted to write a mainstream book about data and analytics that people who didn't care about this stuff would read. And so when I was promoting the book, I wanted to be on mainstream media. So the first place that I went was this show called Good Morning America. I'm sure all you guys are familiar with it. And the producer from Good Morning America calls me. She said, Geoff, this is great stuff. I love your story, but we're not a business show. So we need an example of how this stuff can help someone in everyday life. Do you have an example of that? And at that time, I didn't. But that all changed a few months later. I was speaking at a conference in Lake Tahoe, and I was driving back to San Francisco, and I was about to go do a 10-city speaking tour in Asia. And as I'm driving home, my phone rings, and it's my dad. My parents lived at that time on the East Coast. And he says, son, I have bad news. I said, well, what is it? And he says, well, your mom has suffered a stroke. And I said, okay, is it bad? And he said, yeah, it's pretty bad. So I canceled my Asia trip, flew home to Boston, went inside my mom, and my dad was indeed correct. My mom's stroke was bad. She could not move the entire right side of her body, could not speak, and could not acknowledge me when I walked in. And as my sisters came home, when we sat down with the neurosurgeon said, I want to go over your options with you. And we said, well, what are our options? And he said, well, normally a woman in this condition, over 70, who's just suffered a big brain trauma, we'd like to do nothing. And being a data-driven person, I asked him, well, okay, if you do that, what are her chances to survive? And he said, well, her chances to survive past 60 days are about 22%. I said, I don't really like those numbers. Is there another option? He said, well, there's a riskier option, but I actually think it's the right option. He said, we should go proactively as soon as we can and suck the blood clot out and proactively operate on her. And I said, okay, what are her chances of surviving? Well, he said, well, they're much better, but it's risky because we could really do something to her. She'd be on the ventilator. We could damage her brain more. And as he's saying this, these visions of hitting 15 versus 9 are going through my head. And I start standing up. I'm like, if we think this is right too, it's just like hitting 15 versus 9. And I start going on. And my sisters and my dad are like, this blackjack shit has gone to his head. But as I say this whole thing, they look at me and they understand that I'm right. And so we go and we tell the neurosurgeon to operate. And the neurosurgeon operates. And the next day, my mother starts to perk up. 2 days later, she starts to perk up enough that I felt comfortable leaving. And as I was leaving, I was getting married 9 months later. I said to her, I said, Mom, I just want to make sure that you and I can dance at my wedding. And she said, oh, that'll be no problem. And I'm proud to say that 9 months later, my mom and I did dance at my wedding. And I'm proud to say that, this is all about 4.5 years ago. And she just moved out to California and is leading a pretty normal life. She has trouble saying what she wants to say, but as you can see, that kind of runs in the family. But that idea of making that difficult decision, I owe a lot to the lessons I learned from Blackjack. This idea that if you're going to make a decision, it may be a risky decision, but you have to make the right decision. There's some kind of interesting other things, this idea of gut feelings that we have, and people that gamble always gamble on like this idea of intuition. But if you can use data to make your decisions, you're always going to make better decisions. And then finally, let's say that you have 15 versus a 9, and we're sitting around tonight after this, and you're asking me, hey, Geoff, what should I do on this? What did you say I should do? And I said, oh, you should hit. If you get 6 to make 21, I'm a genius. If you get 7 to make 22 and lose, I'm a moron that they never should have made a movie or a book about. But in both cases, the decision is absolutely correct. One time you get a bad outcome, one time you get a good outcome. So the idea of decision making and separating decision from outcome is huge. And any of you guys that are sports fans or any of this kind of stuff, we see this all the time in sports. Coaches make these decisions on 4th and 1, and if they get the 4th and 1, it's a great decision. It's gutsy. They go for it. If they don't, it's the worst decision in the world. Separating decision from outcome is really, really important idea of just becoming better at decision making. So why is blackjack beatable? Well, blackjack's the only game in the casino that's subject to something called conditional probability, meaning what you see impacts what you're going to see. We've all played roulette. The most magical thing about roulette is the sign above the roulette wheel, which shows the results of the last 20 spins. If the last 6 have been red, you should bet black, correct? No. We all know that's not true. And the same thing is true of craps, right? We all walk up to craps tables, we say, hey, how's this table been? I mean, I love to play craps. It's fun. And we all like to think like there's some magical shooter that can roll no 7s, but lots of 6s or lots of 8s or lots of 11s. But that's not true. Every roll of that dice is 100% independent. But if I take all 4 aces out of a deck of cards and hand you that deck of cards, what do you think the chance of you dealing yourself blackjack are? 0. There's no more aces left. So blackjack is a game with a memory. If you want to go back to the slide for a second, sorry. I got to highlight this. Blackjack is a game with a memory like an elephant. These other games don't have memories like fish. I know it's early, just seeing if you're paying attention. Okay, so what is counting cards? Counting cards is the knowledge. So as you play blackjack, you track. There was a guy actually, he was an MIT professor named Ed Thorpe, and in the 1960s, he determined that when you've seen a lot of high cards, it's bad for the player. When you've seen a lot of low cards, it's bad for the dealer. And so roughly speaking, you can track the cards as they come out, and when there's a lot of high cards left in the deck, you bet more. When there's a lot of low cards left in the deck, you bet less. And that's all you're doing. You're not memorizing every card. You're just tracking the ratio of cards that you see so that you know what your odds are and your odds of winning are. So that's all it is. And if you learn to count cards perfectly, you can raise your edge against the casino to about 2%. So as you can see, like I think a lot of people have this notion that it's this magical thing that you win every time. No, it's a grind like anything else. You're just getting a little bit of edge. So you don't have to be an autistic savant to do it. You just have to practice. Okay. Some other lessons from this sort of world of blackjack. So are you guys familiar with Shane Battier? Any of you guys? He was a basketball player, played for about 9 different teams in the NBA. He does a lot of speaking now. He's a very smart guy, talks about analytics. And he tells this amazing kind of story about the first time that he convinced LeBron James to be data-driven. And he tells the story about how he said to him, hey, you're covering Kevin Durant today. And the data says that when he turns around to his right, he shoots about 23%, but when he turns around to his left, he shoots about 70%. So why don't you try to make him in this game shoot more to his right and see what happens? Okay, and it just so happened that day that Kevin Durant missed a lot of his shots going to his right. LeBron James shut him down. All of a sudden, LeBron James is a believer in analytics. But Shane tells this story, and it always concerns me. Because what would have happened if that day he just happened to make a lot of shots going to his right? Then all of a sudden, like LeBron James no longer believes in analytics. So as you think about analytics and data, you want to focus on a big picture. You don't want to focus on a small data set. And as you try to convince people to be more data-driven, you don't want to boil it down to one decision. You want to say, hey, let's, over the next, if I were Shane, I would have said to LeBron, well, first of all, if I were Shane, I probably wouldn't be anywhere near a basketball court. But if I were talking to LeBron, I would say, hey, LeBron, next 10 times you play Kevin Durant, try to make him go around over his right and see what happens. So this idea of focusing on the big picture, I think, is another important lesson of analytics. So those of you guys that have played blackjack before, how many of you guys think you should ever split tens? Raise your hand if you think you should split tens. This is a highly educated gaming community. I hope no one is actually thinking of splitting tens. But imagine that I tell you you're counting cards. And counting cards is the knowledge of how many tens, face cards, and aces remain versus how many low cards remain. And imagine you have a pair of tens and the dealer has a 6 up, and you know almost every card that you haven't seen is a 10, a face card, or an ace. How many people think now you should probably split tens? Raise your hands. It's really hard to get participation at 9 a.m. in the morning. Okay, so there is a time when you split tens. The math says to you split tens, and it's a very difficult thing to do, but it's also very illustrative of some of the difficult decisions that we have to make in our lives. So there I am, Jeffrey the dealer, in case none of you believe me. I really did play a dealer in the movie. And I go into this casino at MGM, and I always have this to remind me of this difficult decision I make. I go into this casino at MGM Grand. I bet 2 hands of $8,000. First one I get a pair of tens. Second one I get a blackjack. and the dealer has a 6 up. And as I scan the table, I realize that this is a hand that I should split. The dealer pays my blackjack, starts to go buy my 20, because who's going to split 10s with $8,000 on the table? And I said, ma'am, I think I want to split those. And she said, you want to what? And I think I want to, and as I said it, I realized that I didn't really want to split those. I had this sinking pit in my stomach, and I didn't want to split them. And I wondered why. I knew the math said to split them, and I realized as I looked around the table, as I looked behind me, as I looked at the dealer, as I looked at the now crowd of people gathering around, that I didn't want to upset people. I was falling for something called groupthink, where I was making a decision to avoid conflict, to appease people. But they, around me, didn't have the technology, the data, the innovation that I had. And we face this all the times in our business lives, where we've done things a certain way, but all of a sudden now we know things that we didn't used to know. And so you can't be influenced by this concept of groupthink. You're going to have to make some unpopular decisions if you want to innovate. If you want to innovate in a space that's been around as long as gaming has, you have to be okay with upsetting some people. You can't avoid conflict. So I can't fall for groupthink. So the second thing I think about is even though I don't want to piss these people off, I still don't want to do this. And what I realize is that I don't want to split these 10s because they are a winner. $8,000 is a winner. Why would I give up that winner? But here I am falling for something called loss aversion. As human beings, we're impacted more by a loss than we are by a gain of the same amount. The idea of losing scares us. And so we make bad decisions based on avoiding loss. So the classic example of this is when I moved to San Francisco, there was a company called Apple that was trading for 60. And we bought some Apple stock, me and my buddies, because we all used Apple products. We were like, we should buy Apple stock. Apple stock goes from 60 to 120 in roughly 11 months. So we're like, awesome. My friends come to me and they say, hey, Geoff, we're going to sell our Apple stock. I said, why? They said, well, we don't want to be greedy. It just doubled in 11 months. Why would we just sell? Or do you think Apple's a buy or sell? We think it's still a buy, but we don't want to be greedy. We want to take our profits. Well, how do you think they feel now? There's another company in the Valley called Facebook. And I've told this story twice at Facebook. The second time I told this story, the first time I spoke there, they had 30 million users. The second time I spoke there, 13 months later, they had 500 million users. And as I told this story, I said, you guys are a perfect example. Now that you guys have 500 million users, are you guys going to take the same kind of risks? And before the words were out of my mouth, an executive from the back row named Chamal screamed, hell yeah. He knew that they would still need to take risks to grow. And I'd say buying Oculus, buying WhatsApp for 17 billion, buying Instagram for $1 billion, those are all risks that have paid off. So I can't be loss averse. I got to do the right thing. I split my 10s. Dealer gives me an ace on the first one, a 9 on the second one. Dealer flips a 10 to make 16, and then gets another 10 to make 26. I grab my $16,000 and my blackjack, my another $12,000, and I basically run away from the table because everyone at the table wants to kill me at this point. But making that difficult decision and understanding sort of how to overcome cognitive biases is a really important thing to me. So let's go back to this opening story. I'm sure all of you guys are wondering, like, oh no, what happened? Like, what happened? Did he? Well, it's all in my book, which is available on Amazon, so if you want to read it, you can. Okay, so I believe in math. I believe in data. I believe in the power of data. So here I am, just lost $50,000. The math calls for me to bet 3 hands of $10,000. So I do because I believe in math. First one, I get a 9, it gets a 6. Double that down to get a queen to make 19. 19, I stand. Ace 4 against a 6 is actually another hand that you need to double down by basic strategy. So I do. I double that down. I get a 4 to make 19. I have 19, 19, 19 against the dealer's 6. Here's my chance to win back everything I just lost. Right? I have another $50,000 on the table. And the only reason I'm in this situation is because how stubbornly I believe in process, and I believe in the philosophy of what we're doing. So here's my chance. I'm going to win back this woman's house. The dealer flips a king to make 16, my triumphant moment, and it's a 5 to make 21. So I lose another $50,000. I am crushed. I stumble up to my room at Caesars, collapse on the floor, stare up at the ceiling, wonder to myself, why is there a mirror up there? But I was 21 years old. I had no idea. So as I'm sitting there, I'm like, do people lie in bed and get ready? That's weird. So as I'm sitting there and thinking this through, I think about what do I want to do next? And I think like, God, I don't really want to play anymore. Maybe I'll just put this decision off. But that would be falling for omission bias. I can't do that. And I started thinking about this idea of like not playing because I don't want to lose anymore. I just lost, but that's being loss averse. And then I started thinking like about the big picture, like focus on the big picture. Well, over the course of my blackjack career, I'd actually done quite well. So why am I influenced by one decision? And then I also think about like, had I made the right decision and just suffered a poor outcome, or had I made a poor decision? And I'd actually pretty clear that I made the right decision. So I went back down, and actually I've told this story a variety of times, and the time I told it about 3 or 4 years ago was this sort of pinnacle moment for me. I was speaking at a VC conference that this guy Vinod Khosla puts on, and the speaker before me that day was a guy by the name of Bill Gates, so I was very intimidated to be speaking. And as I got to the story, Vinod, who put this on, he's sort of a legendary VC, he steps up and raises his hand and says, I don't believe you. And I said, what do you mean? He says, I don't believe you. How could you? How could you have doubted yourself? How could you have thought about quitting? I don't believe you thought about quitting. And he's kind of right. I didn't ever really consider quitting because I fundamentally believe in our process. I fundamentally believe that you have to deal with adversity and overcome loss and embrace failure to become better. And these are all the types of things that I learned from my time as the MIT Blackjack team. So I went back down and I kept playing. And over the next 2 days, I won back $100,000. And the last day I was there, I won back another 70. And that moment is what I consider to be my seminal moment of like why I believe in data, why I believe in analytics, and why I've become a relative success in life. So thank you guys for the time. I've enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you.